Hi, thank you for joining us today. I am Jennifer Hawks, the U.S. Government Practice Lead at A-LIGN, and I am thrilled to be here today to discuss StateRAMP and FedRAMP with two honored StateRAMP guests, Leah McGrath, Executive Director, and Fred Britton, Executive Advisor. Leah, Fred, would you mind introducing yourselves, and then I'll do the same.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Leah McGrath, and I serve as the Executive Director of StateRAMP. My background is in state and local government, and prior to coming to this StateRAMP team and mission, I served as Deputy Mayor for the city of Fishers, Indiana, where I was dealing with a lot of the same challenges that we see across the country of governments trying to bring innovation to what they do faster and more securely, and to serve our citizens as well as our team members in this new digital environment. And so through those experiences was able to meet some of our founders, our two co-founders of StateRAMP, and had the opportunity to facilitate the steering committee in 2020, to see StateRAMP launch in 2021, and then to be a part of really all of the innovations through iteration that have occurred with the StateRAMP program, and to work with our phenomenal board and committee members and partners such as A-LIGN. So we're really grateful to be here and to talk about some of the things that we're working at or working on with StateRAMP and the benefits of the program.
Thanks. And I'm Fred Britton. I have my background is I was 25 years in public higher education with the University of Maine system doing IT stuff, starting out changing hard drives to ending there with policy and overseeing a consolidated group of campuses. And I left there and became CIO for the state of Maine for 4 years. And I stayed through the first term of the governor. And I've since come, and as I do serve as executive advisor to the nonprofit StateRAMP.org. And I also lead the program management office, which is a commercial entity that has a contract with the .org to process security reviews and all that other work associated. I think what drew me in was in my time in government, I thought I was going to the state of Maine to deliver IT services, and found that our number one priority was cyber. And as you can imagine, with all the services being purchased, a lot of my efforts went into, the efforts were really twofold. One side was, how do I get more money from the legislature for cyber? And the other was all about procurement and how are we contracting with secure vendors. So that was along that path that I met Leah, and everybody knows Leah on the state side, and this just became really important. So when I had the opportunity to come over and join this mission and have a national impact, how could I say no?
Excellent. Thank you both. A little background about myself. I have been in U.S. government cybersecurity governance space for over 20 years on both the advisory and the assessment side. My roots are in the risk management framework and predecessor frameworks, particularly within DoD and other civilian agencies. And then as a natural progression of the RMF and the overall movement to the cloud, I've been involved with FedRAMP in particular since inception, 2011, 2012 timeframe, honestly, before FedRAMP was even called FedRAMP. And I'm super excited to be part of the community to support and help bring and expand RAMP reach into state and local municipalities as well. So now that you know who you are listening to, let's go ahead and set this foundation and start with some basics about the RAMP program. We believe everyone's familiar with FedRAMP and StateRAMP at a fundamental level, but to ensure that we're all speaking the same language, both programs are security authorization frameworks that essentially allow a cloud to process government data. But of course, details matter, and that's what we're going to dive into today. Some of the commonalities and the differences between the two programs, and then highlight the benefit and the value of pursuing RAMP authorization. And then we're going to close with some practical guidance in order to help you start your RAMP journey. So let's begin with applicability. Leah, would you mind explaining to whom each of these programs apply, and more importantly, why they apply?
Absolutely. And so, what StateRAMP, our security program, is looking at, and Fred, you can chime in here as you'd like, and especially if I say anything in error, I'll count on you. But what StateRAMP is looking at, as well as FedRAMP's program, are those SaaS products, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, really focusing on the cloud technologies when there could be, when they're processing, storing, or transmitting government data, or if they could impact the security of government data and critical infrastructure. And so at the FedRAMP level, the federal program is evaluating the risk posture of those SaaS, IaaS, or PaaS products that are used in the federal agencies. And StateRAMP was developed, as I know we're going to talk about, to really help solve that challenge for states and local governments and educational institutions as well.
Great. Fred, did you have anything to add?
I will leave that until we get into some of the next questions.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Can we speak to when FedRAMP or StateRAMP would not apply? And I'm really leaning towards those essential characteristics defined in NIST 800-145, cloud computing.
Fred, do you want to take this one, or I can speak to you?
Sure. So, I think one of the things we'll talk about is some of the differences between FedRAMP and StateRAMP, and why would a state or local or higher ed go for StateRAMP when FedRAMP was an option. And so this was one of my questions as I came into this, saying, well, I've historically required FedRAMP in procurements. Why would I do StateRAMP instead? And so this gets us into this other conversation around, what do you get from StateRAMP if you are state or local or higher ed? And the answer, there's a few answers. The first is there is some visibility that FedRAMP provides to federal government agencies. That doesn't apply if you are not a federal agency. So you can have some confidence that, yes, we know a 3PAO has reviewed the product. We know that the FedRAMP office or an agency has looked at that. But we ourselves would like to be able to look at this. So StateRAMP gives that sort of option. And I'll tell you, for those of you that are familiar with security in the recent years, I think about Log4j. And where did what do you do as a government when some major vulnerability comes out and most of your services are contracted out? How do you find out what your impact is? And so in our case, we were sending letters to each and every contracted service provider saying, could you please tell us if you've been impacted? And if you have, can you tell us more about that? As opposed to being able to go look at very recent documentation and find out where that provider is at. So that's one of the reasons, and I know we're going to talk about some other reasons, but so when you talk about the actual control set, we're very similar. But when you start talking about the outcomes from the program, it is very different for state and locals.
Absolutely. Some other commonalities and differences, we utilize the same control catalog, Fred, as you were just talking about, NIST 853. But there's differences in the way that we engage with each FedRAMP and StateRAMP. Leah, would you mind speaking to how to engage with the PMO?
Absolutely. And really, it's one of the core differences between StateRAMP and FedRAMP. FedRAMP being part of GSA as a federal agency or department, StateRAMP is a nonprofit. So our mission is around education, bringing all of the stakeholders together from industry as well as the public sector to really drive toward that framework harmonization, standards, so that we can have a security program that allows providers the ability to verify once in order to serve their many government customers. And as Fred mentioned, that allows the providers to share that continuous monitoring and ongoing assessment information with their government customers, all with an eye not on compliance as much as it is on how do we have better security together. Because by sharing the continuous monitoring insights or ongoing assessment insights, our public sector members are able to have transparency and where there could be risks so that they can take action if needed to better protect their citizens, their data, their critical infrastructure. And that's really what we're founded on, is trying to kind of drive that that community together, marching forward together. And so because we're a nonprofit and education, is our focus, and we have members, we have industry members as well as public sector members, we're here as a resource always. We want to help, we want to connect, we want to help grow the maturity of the entire community with this program. And so some of the ways that the FedRAMP security program and our StateRAMP security offerings are similar is what you mentioned already, Jen, in terms of, our requirements are all built on NIST 853 Rev 5. So the most recently published version of NIST 853. And we do that so that we can align with what the federal government's doing and what those different requirements are that flow down to states and local governments. And also we found in our research, most states and locals are pointing to NIST. So we really, that's one of the great, I think, things about our program and the synergy between what the federal government is doing and ours is that coalescing around NIST 853 as our common set of standards that we're pointing to. Similarly, when we launched, and still today, we launched with similar authorization program with StateRAMP Ready and StateRAMP Authorized and Provisionally Authorized that very closely align to FedRAMP Ready and FedRAMP Authorized requirements, and that very similar control requirements, similar process requiring a third-party assessing organization audit. Here's where we're different, is probably in that definitely in that review process. So Fred manages our program management office, our PMO, and one of the differences between the FedRAMP program and the way StateRAMP works is we really have more of a centralized program management office. So Fred's team is going to verify and validate that security package every time so that there is consistency in the way that our requirements are applied. And that was really important to our government members from the very beginning and continues to be important today because they want to know that if it says StateRAMP Ready or StateRAMP Authorized, it's met the same requirements every time across the board. The other way that we're different is we don't require a government sponsor. If you're going through the FedRAMP program and now it's iterating and changing, as we know, but a majority of those who have a FedRAMP authorization for their product have done so using that agency sponsor path. We don't really have that. One of the things that was very important to our founders and our steering committee was that this is a program that is open to any provider, regardless of their experience, their maturity, whether they have a contract or don't. We wanted to make sure this was something that was accessible and available. And so with that, the way that our program works for StateRAMP Authorized, which is our highest security status, or provisionally authorized, we have an approvals committee. You can have a government sponsor that acts as kind of that secondary check to the program management office's review, or we have an approvals committee that meets every single month, and they are government officials who Fred works very closely with. Thank you, Fred. And they are the ones who are going to review the PMO's recommendation, the artifacts that are associated, and say, yes, we agree, this meets the requirements, or, well, we maybe have a few questions here. And so that is something that is unique to our process. The other thing that's different regarding our security program is what we've really done in iterating our program is develop a risk assessment model. And we found that this was really important because as providers were coming to us who serve states and local governments or educational entities, they were not quite ready for StateRAMP Ready or StateRAMP Authorized. This may have been their first foray into these NIST controls, and they were wondering, like, what do I do now, right? So we needed to be able to give them visibility into where their strengths are, where there are gaps, so that they understood what's the full picture of an investment for them into this process. And that's when our committees, our PMO helped with this, our committees who do so much work, and we appreciate them, and our board came together to develop our StateRAMP Security Snapshot program, which is something that we're really proud of because it's helping so many kind of take those first steps into the program. So Fred, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to that.
I'd be happy to. So, and I'm very proud of what we've done with the snapshot, particularly in our move of the snapshot from NIST 853 Rev 4 to Rev 5. And so the idea of the snapshot is it can be used in a variety of ways. One of those ways is if a government goes out to do a solicitation and they say, we would really like you to have a StateRAMP authorization. However, we're willing to have a conversation with you provided you go to the StateRAMP office and have a snapshot done. And what is a snapshot? It's a score of, we've selected 40 base controls, and the way that those were selected is based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So instead of just counting controls, we're weighting them as well within that score to say, are they doing the most impactful things? And we can give them a score and they can go to that government with a solicitation and say, here we are. There's other things they can do with the score too, which is to say, let's just have a third party quickly look at our stuff. And from there, we can also draw a roadmap to security improvement. So it also helps them benchmark themselves. And a government at any point, if they have concerns about a provider, could say, hey, we just want you to go off and get a snapshot. And coming from the government space where a lot of that used to look like self-attestation, we put out a solicitation, you check the box. Do you do this? Oh, yeah, we do that. And then lo and behold, we would reach contracting phase or even beyond and discover, well, maybe we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and just say they didn't understand the question that they said yes to. So this provides that starting point. And I think one of the important things here is these are many providers who don't have a huge footprint. They don't have tens and hundreds of thousands of employees. They could be smaller businesses, and state, local, higher education want to do business with them. Perhaps they have a bespoke solution. I think about when we went off and did solicitations for liquor management. Like the federal government isn't buying a lot of those products. So FedRAMP's not an option. Maybe there's a variety of them, and we want to do business with an in-state provider. This gives that opportunity for folks to get started in that journey that maybe couldn't get there otherwise. I mean, you think about that long sponsorship process and everything else. So that's our snapshot today. We don't just turn over scores to governments. That is still in the hands of the provider. And I think that's also important, is we'll facilitate requests between a government and a provider, but frequently the governments say, you can bid on this, however, to bid, include your snapshot, or down the road, they come to us and say, this vendor's done a snapshot, we'd like to have access, and we will jump in the middle and say to the vendor, provide the access or grant us permission to provide it. But we don't just open up that sensitive information to governments without provider approval.
I love what you said there, Fred. And I think the other thing that we do is also help facilitate communication from providers to governments too. So just as some of our participating governments may come to us and say, hey, we're interested in seeing the snapshot, or we'd like access to continuous monitoring details, that's always up to the providers to grant. We encourage you to, right? That helps build that trust and helps build really that communication sharing and information sharing that we think is really critical to a good cybersecurity authorization management program, which is what RAMP stands for. But we also will help facilitate requests the other way. So for those providers that are working with a government, whether they're listed on our website as a participating government or not, if you find yourself working through a solicitation or an RFI or just having conversations with a government leader, feel free to say, hey, would you accept StateRAMP, or can I connect you? Or ask us, reach out to our team and ask us to help drive that conversation. What we've found is many government leaders out there are really leveraging the StateRAMP program, and they may just not be listed yet as a participating government on our website, or especially if you get down to that local level or agency level, they may still be learning about StateRAMP. So that's where we really try to help facilitate the interactions both ways between the provider community and our participating and other government entities.
Absolutely, Leah. That's super helpful. We frequently encounter CSPs that are working at both the federal and the state level.
Mhm.
And at the federal level, it's easy in that FedRAMP is law, air quotes,
Yeah.
because none of this is easy,
Right.
right? But at a state level, we frequently encourage our CSP clients to reach out to the PMO for guidance and support in navigating that landscape. Aside from the StateRAMP and FedRAMP PMO, who are clearly key stakeholders, who else should CSPs be engaging early in this process?
Absolutely. Well, I think engaging those, our team who works with the governments, engaging your government customers, engaging our team. Jessica Van Eerdy is our chief of operations, and she oversees our government engagement team, who is working every day. The other thing that I would point our any of our members to is we recently launched procurement resources and toolkit, and this is really aimed toward the public sector, and it was the result of a 12-month engagement that we had with NASPO, the National Association of State Procurement Officials, and StateRAMP had a joint task force where we really walked through some of those lots of different publications on procurement for cloud technologies and came out of it with, I think, a really great toolkit and resource guide for our government entities that are looking to incorporate StateRAMP into what they do. And so that is an important resource that industry can look at. You can take that to your government partners, but that we are really kind of promoting. We just rolled it out in September this year. So we're excited about that. The other stakeholders certainly would be our PMO. So if you have questions, if you're starting with a snapshot, that's going to give you a really good starting place to understand what is the lift for your organization, right? So having those good conversations up front to understand what's required. And then I would also encourage you to have conversations with other stakeholders in your organization. Think about your business development team. Think about your CISO. Think about your compliance managers and others in your organization who care about the customers, who care about security, because we get to really bring those different people together in this effort.
Absolutely.
Can I add just a little bit to that? And then, Jen, I'm going to give Leah the opportunity to segue into another piece here, if you don't mind. So as you're engaging, there's a couple of, if you're a provider who's thinking about engaging with StateRAMP, you may have already engaged with FedRAMP. And so one of the programs that has been created is a fast track process. So if you're doing business with states that say, hey, we want StateRAMP, in fact, maybe we prefer it over FedRAMP, you can bring your RAR or your SAR from your favorite 3PAO and bring it to us, and we will evaluate that and take it through the process. So that was really important as well, is that we're not adding a huge burden to our CSPs in order to engage. So if they're coming from the standpoint of we already have FedRAMP, you don't need to go back out and double your audits and double your fund. You can use those, and we're happy to take those through. And as Leah pointed out, we have an approvals committee for StateRAMP that's made up of government executives. And again, our PMO will review that and take it to that committee. So it should be a relatively painless process to get there. And then there's those that are not there, and maybe they're far, far away. And we talked about the snapshot, but when we talk about how to engage with the PMO and we think about the mom and pops and the state-owned or the managed within a single state, there's another program that I think we want to mention that goes kind of hand in hand with Snapshot at times. And so, Leah, I think this might be the moment to talk about the Progressing Snapshot program.
Yep. I was thinking about that, and also just what it means to be a member of StateRAMP. So, part of the first step in engaging with StateRAMP is becoming a member, joining the effort, and that does come with some membership dues annually that begin at $1,500, and that's just part of our program. But it also gives you access to a great community, and that to me is just fantastic. We're building out our members only page with more resources and the ability to connect with other members and to be part of helping drive the education and best practices. So really encourage folks to become a member and be a part of it. Part of that also, once you've had that snapshot, or if you're thinking that's something you're interested in, we also work with the PMO to provide our Progressing Snapshot program. And this has been fantastic. It's our fastest growing program because what it does is it allows you, our providers, to be able to come in, have a snapshot on their product that then is updated quarterly. So every 3 months, you're going to have a new snapshot score. And that's fantastic because you can demonstrate progress that you're making, or maybe not. And then every month have an advisory call with our PMO advisors to be able to understand what to tackle next, right? How do you get the most bang for your buck? How do we drive toward not just, we've said this before, it's not about a compliance checklist. We really care about how do we drive toward better security outcomes for you and your organization and for those you serve. And so the Progressing Snapshot program has been just very exciting to watch grow and mature. And we've seen our participating governments really gravitate to this as well. So as an example, we have a very close partnership with the state of Texas. So the state of Texas is a participating government. They are phenomenal partners. Our team has weekly calls with them, actually. So we are real-time updating every Friday what's happening in our program and theirs. But they see so much value in our Progressing Snapshot program that if you are a part of the StateRAMP Progressing Snapshot program, that is a way to be able to earn TrustRAMP provisional status. That does not expire so long as you stay a part of the Progressing Snapshot program and continue to get your, to achieve your quarterly updates. The whole reason behind that and why we hear our participating governments embracing this is that they want to know there's a level of commitment from an organization, and being a part of the Progressing Snapshot program demonstrates that, and that progress is being made. So to do those things, you do have to commit as a provider to sharing your snapshot, right, score with the participating governments when they're requesting that, because that is what allows the states of Texas and other examples to be able to have confidence in the program, right? And to know that they can have transparency and where those risks and strengths lie. So I think that's been really exciting to see. And the last thing I would say is it really especially is so great for those early in their journey or those small and medium-sized businesses. Fred, you mentioned this. This is something during our steering committee days in 2020, I don't think we had a meeting where someone didn't say, we need to make sure this is business friendly. And so business friendly means a lot of things, right? It doesn't mean that we're not keeping security as a priority. What it means, though, is that we're trying to be easy to work with. We're trying to help everybody get to where they're trying to go. That from a fee standpoint, we have reduced membership dues, we have reduced PMO fees for small and medium-sized businesses, because we don't want that to be a barrier to participating. And especially the more local you get, the more this matters, because states and local governments want to work with their local businesses. And in fact, it's been really fun to even have conversations with some state leaders who view the Progressing Snapshot program and all the work that we're doing, because it's kind of like, remember, a risk assessment model. It's a journey. You may start at Snapshot, and then you may end at StateRAMP authorized, or wherever it makes sense for your organization to go. But we're hearing state leaders beginning to talk about this as this is a great economic development opportunity as well, right? When they see their small businesses and their medium-sized businesses engaging, it's not just opening the doors for them to be able to participate and work with their local governments and state entities, but it's opening doors to be able to cross those state borders and grow their business potential too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comprehensive insight to the recently added programs that are clearly successful in greater adoption of the RAMP programs in general.
Yep.
So we've talked a little bit about the benefits and the way to move into a RAMP mature status. Some of the other business benefits, Fred, you spoke to very briefly when you said something to the effect of you assess once, use many. So what we're speaking to there applies not just from FedRAMP to StateRAMP, but even at the FedRAMP level alone, one assessment for one organization, one agency is likely to be leveraged by multiple agencies. So there's reciprocity among agencies at the various state, local, and federal levels, as well as up and down. So that's really, really strong. What are some other benefits that organizations can realize from high value assessments? How do high value assessments help the process overall?
Sure. Well, any number of ways, but let's say you have different people who are pursuing FedRAMP or StateRAMP for a variety of reasons. You may have salespeople saying, "Hey, we want to go knocking on this door, and we can't knock on the door unless we have this authorization. And so just go get it so we can sell." And then you have maybe a CISO who says, "Security is really important to me." And there's an analogy I would draw, and I can't help it from my time in higher education. I had an opportunity to sit with a president from another state university system. And as I was sitting with her, for those of you that have ever taken a child off to college, you have undoubtedly read the U.S. News and World Report rankings of colleges. It is the #1 ranking system, and it is very important to those schools how they rank. And I went and I was chatting with this president. She said, "Listen, Fred, nearly everything I do is focused on our ranking, the various criteria, and trying to boost how we stand. And if it's student to faculty ratio, I'm trying to make that better. If it's, and whatever it is." And I at first I'm a little put off. And I thought, geez, I would have thought you would have been thinking about educational outcomes and you weren't. And what I was thinking was, she's playing to the test. And then she stopped and said, "And you're probably thinking I'm playing to the test." Well, now that you mention it. And she said, "It may appear that way, but the reality is this: that test has been defined and redefined and iterated, and the things that they are testing are the most important things for the quality of our outcomes." And because that's what we're looking at with NIST, is these are the things that are the most important for security. So for a CISO who is sitting there saying, "Well, I don't like playing to the test," give yourself pause for a moment and look at how those NIST standards come to be. And by pursuing that, you are achieving a higher security posture. And so that's the real value. And so when you start talking what's a high quality assessment, you can use that assessment to say, yes, I'm using this assessment so I can get to my StateRAMP authorization. But a CISO is also sitting there saying, "I'm using a high quality assessment and I want them to look as close as they can, because this is also a great way for me to improve my security program and assure that my security program is doing all the things that I believe it does."
Yep.
Absolutely. And that real-time feedback that is present during those assessments give the CSP an opportunity to not only remediate, but also support presentation of the strongest posture as is possible in that final report. Leah, how does that help facilitate processing timelines?
Yes, absolutely. The stronger the assessment, the better from a process standpoint, because then you're going to come through the StateRAMP PMO review process, or even the FedRAMP review process. I can speak more to StateRAMP's process, right? But when you come through that, the stronger the assessment, the more likely you're going to have a smoother process, fewer questions to answer, fewer POEM items or vulnerabilities to kind of contend with, as you said, Jen, or mitigate. And so I think that strong assessment upfront not only helps improve your security posture, but is also going to help that process, so that as you're going through the review with the PMO, it can be really smooth.
Absolutely. And again, that real-time feedback offers a learning opportunity. Fred, to your point, the NIST controls are the NIST controls for a reason. They are important, and those that are heavier weighted that typically end up being the ones that need to be addressed during assessments. Those are the ones that there's a learning opportunity for the CSP to take advantage of the assessment team's feedback and guidance on how to remediate, of course, not crossing that line, right? Um, Excellent. So moving forward, one of the other things that we wanted to talk about was practical guidance on how to get started in this process. If you're a CSP beginning to embark on this journey, where do we even begin?
Well, I like to say start with StateRAMP. and, and I would say also start with a snapshot if you're really trying to think about where to begin, because I think the snapshot is going to give you a tool that allows you to have a very good conversation with the business stakeholders who are probably the ones to say, yes, we want to proceed, or no, right? What the snapshot is going to give you is with those core 40 controls that align with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, as Fred mentioned, it's going to give you a chance to understand where have you already made a lot of progress and where do you need to focus. And when I've had conversations with, it could be CEOs or executives, the leadership who are trying to make this decision as to whether to invest or not in the program or the process, right? One of the things that can be challenging is not knowing what they're agreeing to. I'll never forget that. I had one president of a company say, I don't know if we're investing in climbing Mount Everest or we're going to, Gatlinburg to on a hike. I don't know what I'm committing to. And I think that is a really great starting place to understand where you are, so that you can benchmark where you need to go. And so that's why I like the snapshot so much, is it does help everyone understand. You can then engage our stakeholders. You can bring people together. And I would say also reach out to our team, our StateRAMP team. We are happy to hop on a call anytime to answer the questions that are really important to your decision making and those leaders who are making the decisions. So if you're wanting to know more about who's participating, what are governments doing, how are they adopting StateRAMP, or if you want to know more about just what it looks like, what that roadmap looks like for your product team, those are things that our team is always happy to hop on a call to discuss. And finding, Jen, trusted partners along the way, right? Because this is not something that you are probably going to do alone. And so being able to connect with other partners that you can trust, who can either advise or consult, and ultimately that 3PAO, if StateRAMP authorization or ready is what you're going for, that 3PAO who can do the quality assessments.
And if you don't mind, I tag a little, let me do an and with Leah. This program created by governments, and they had a number of outcomes that they were looking for. And there were things they also were saying, there's concerns we have, so let's create programs that will also mitigate the concerns. So obviously, procurement is hard, security is hard, create this, get authorized once, use across states sort of approach. And then they put some criteria around that. If you're in a state procurement office, you want to make sure when you do a solicitation, you have as rich a pool of bids as you possibly can. So here we are going into this, and the snapshot and progressing snapshot, that's an iteration. And it's a response to government saying, we've got to have another way for smaller businesses and local businesses to get into our pipeline and get started, because they don't have the upfront investment to go get this full authorization while they're not pulling revenue. So it's a way to get started. So when you stop and think about that criteria, we also want to hear from our CSPs. So when you engage with us, and I think Leah really outlined membership. Well, the membership accomplishes a few things. We also want to hear the barriers that CSPs may experience in the kinds of outcomes they're looking for, because part of our job is to meet that government criteria of saying, Make sure when we put out a solicitation, we have as many bids as possible. If we want to go buy a product, we want as full a marketplace as possible. We don't, they don't want to lose ground in procurement. So that's where intel coming from our CSPs becomes important. So when you engage with us, don't think about we're coming in, we're picking a package, we're going to stay with that package, and then we disengage from StateRAMP. Remember, you're a member. You're not just getting your badge and running away. We do want to hear about your journey and try to smooth that out, because we're supposed to be the easy button for governments, but we also want to be that easy button for providers.
That's
Oh,
well said. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly agree that the StateRAMP PMO is very CSP friendly, which is fantastic to see. Stepping back a little bit, if you're a new CSP and you're trying to understand how to begin this journey, and it's maybe not clear cut, all my business is in the state arena or the federal arena, you do need to understand your business drivers. You do need to understand if you've got contractual requirements, either currently or if there are upcoming solicitations to which you want to position for, and figure out what your service offering will be, particularly at the federal level, but also at the state level as well. Many of our CSP clients engage advisory firms that are helping them to identify their authorization boundary and implement the controls, build the documentation, and really help to navigate that landscape at large. And then, of course, the required 3PAO to perform the assessment, engage that 3PAO sooner rather than later, not necessarily for advisory support, because the RAMP programs do require a very strict line relative to assessing versus implementing or providing guidance under an advisory blanket. But engaging your assessor sooner rather than later so that you can understand the assessment methods that will be levied on your system, how to gather that evidence and artifacts. And then again, working with those use cases, I frequently hear CSPs say, well, I don't know if I'm a low, moderate, or a high system. How do I even figure that out? So understanding the use cases and the data that will be used when you're within your system, processed by your system, that drives determination of your control selection because of your system categorization, low, moderate, or high. So working with an advisory firm to understand your system baseline and your controls and implementation way ahead is a very good start for many CSPs, particularly at the federal level, that may not have a reach into StateRAMP PMO, for instance, to help guide along that landscape. With that said, Leah or Fred, is there anything else that you wanted to surface on this call relative to benefits or way ahead from a StateRAMP perspective?
One thing that came to mind as you were talking, Jen, if you are, and I have this conversation often, so I wanted to say it. I'll have a conversation with providers who are on their FedRAMP journey or have started pursuing FedRAMP authorization, and maybe they're just early in that engagement and now learning about StateRAMP. One of the things that I'll often encourage is that if you don't yet have an agency sponsor, you don't have to wait until you have a FedRAMP authorization or go through the whole process to be able to come through StateRAMP. So we've actually had some providers who have had, their RAR or SAR completed all entirely in FedRAMP documentation and templates, because their intent is to receive the StateRAMP ready or StateRAMP authorization, status. And then while they're trying to find someone in the federal, sphere to sponsor them. And so you don't have to wait. If you're going through the process and you know that FedRAMP's where you are also trying to land, then you can always have that FedRAMP documentation and template. Our PMO will accept that. That's part of our FedRAMP fast track for FedRAMP process, so that they can bring that package through you'll probably be able to receive that StateRAMP ready or authorization designation faster. We're really proud of that, actually trying to kind of have a good, smooth review process for you. And even in that review process, can learn a lot that can help inform when you are able to achieve that agency sponsor. So that's something that I just wanted to clarify. You don't have to wait to receive a federal status to be able to come through the StateRAMP program. As soon as you have that raw RSR, bring it on through, and our team and Fred's team will be ready to help assist.
Yeah, that's fantastic news, and that really is supportive. You mentioned a couple of the statuses within StateRAMP. Do you mind elaborating on those for the audience?
Not at all. And actually, I'm going to do a plug for our website. If you go to stateramp.org and if you go to our resources tab, you'll see something that says templates and resources for Rev 5, because we are on the NIST 853 Rev 5 version for our requirements. If you click on that, you can read more about the statuses, the requirements, the policy documents. But if you think about our risk assessment model, it begins with snapshot, it goes to progressing snapshot. And if you're part of our progressing snapshot, you'll be listed on our public website. We have an authorized product list and a progressing product list. So if you're going to our website, you can see that and see who's involved already. If you're part of our progressing snapshot program, that is the first kind of point in time where you will be listed as a public status, being part of our progressing product list. Then we have StateRAMP ready, StateRAMP authorized, and we also have provisionally authorized. I'm going to come back to that, put a dot in it. So StateRAMP ready, StateRAMP authorized, and provisionally authorized are very similar, similar to the federal program, all require that third-party assessing organization, RAR or SAR, the audit, the ready assessment review, or the security assessment review. And then once you achieve a StateRAMP ready or authorized or provisionally authorized status, to maintain that status, you must comply with our continuous monitoring requirements. They are similar to that of FedRAMP, so there's monthly reporting and annual audit that is required as well. And those are the statuses that are a part of our authorized product list. Once a provider has engaged a 3PAO for a ready assessment or a full security assessment, can actually let us know and be listed as part of our progressing product list. That was something that we wanted to do, is recognize the providers who are really putting in that extra work. And it's a signal to the public sector as well that this is a provider that's on their way, right, to StateRAMP ready or authorized. And so we really try to celebrate that, which is why we have the progressing product list. The provisionally authorized status is a status that is unique to StateRAMP. It is different than, you may hear provisional ATOs used in different ways. Ours is different than what's in FedRAMP or any of the other programs you may be familiar with. We actually, in 2023, our Standards and Technical Committee and others really talked about how do we manage, it's sort of the chicken and the egg. How do we manage the situation where there may be a product that is reliant or connected to other technologies that are not yet FedRAMP or StateRAMP authorized? Rather than having to rip and replace some really critical technologies to that product, we wanted to find a path to continue moving forward. And so we have an updated boundary guidance document that you can find on that templates and resources page I mentioned that really helps walk through this. It allows providers to continue going through the process and to achieve a provisionally authorized status. That means you've met, really, in most cases, all of the requirements to become authorized, but you may have a technology that is interdependent or reliant within your boundary or connected to your boundary that is not yet StateRAMP or FedRAMP authorized. So our solution is those products then must have a snapshot, right? Because what we're trying to do is just raise the transparency of potential risk. So that allows the participating governments, it allows our PMO to be able to have that visibility and gives the product and the provider team the ability to still move forward. And at some point, maybe that technology they're reliant on will achieve a StateRAMP ready or authorized, and that will allow them to move to StateRAMP authorization. or maybe they make the decision to move to another technology. That's really the business decision that we want to leave in the hands of the businesses. But the provisionally authorized and our updated boundary guidance document was something that we were really excited to be able to bring forward to help answer that chicken and egg question that so many providers were getting stuck in that loop. And we wanted to give a path forward. So that is, when we say provisionally authorized, it's a great achievement. It is, and that's something we talk to our government partners and members about. This is a good achievement. It means that they've achieved some rigorous standards and demonstrated that. The provisionally authorized, that provisionally word is there because of the underlying technology.
Absolutely. And that puts the decision on whether or not to leverage that technology with the associated risk in the hands of the agency that has the need, which is exactly where it should be.
Exactly.
Excellent. Excellent.
So that is one of the goals of our, as we talk about iterating programs, is we think about providing a toolkit to the government officials where they get to make choices. And instead of, and there is a wise man in the state CIO circle that says, if you've seen one state, you have only seen one state. And so they're in a variety of places and they're making different choices. Their investments vary when it comes to cyber. But our goal is that they can pick and choose whether or not they want to say every cloud product we acquire should be StateRAMP authorized. Or my favorite example is where they come in and they say, Fish and Wildlife, if you're managing Medicare, you probably want a really high level for any systems that are associated. Yeah. But if you're talking about Fish and Wildlife and counting trout, you may not feel that that's necessary and your willingness to accept risk is higher. And so that is our overall goal, is to make sure that the government officials can select the right programs that suit their business need. And we don't know if they're counting trout, if there isn't also interconnections to payroll of
that's right.
wardens, right? We don't know, but they know, and that's where they can begin to make those choices.
Right. That drives back to those use cases, right?
It does. And in fact, if you look at our procurement resources, what you'll see there is exactly what Fred said, reinforced again. And we also have an updated data classification tool that is really just an entry point to kind of understand, Jen, as you said, do I point to StateRAMP low impact, moderate impact, high, what else is involved? And so that can be a great resource, not only for our participating governments, but also for the provider community too. So that's out there to take a look at.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Leah. Thank you, Fred. I really appreciate your time and your insight. And thank you to the listener community for your time and dialing in. If you have questions and further discussion will be held at the end of the summit. So we encourage you to dial in at that point too. Cheers.
Thank you for having us.